So welcome everybody to our State of Recruitment 2021 webinar. I'm thrilled today to be joined by Talent Nexus, Sophie Bailey and Rob Prince, and we worked in conjunction with them to create and lead our third recruitment pulse survey, and also by Martin Bramall from Idibu. So Rob, would you just like to explain what the recruitment pulse survey is?
Yeah, sure. So today is all about this survey that we ran, which we started running right at the beginning of COVID, which feels so long ago now. And initially what we were hoping to do was kind of capture the state of the nation, as it were, right at the beginning of all of this, to see how the pandemic was going to affect recruitment organisations. So since the first one, sort of 10, 11 months ago now, back in April, we've done two since, so this is the third of three parts. And we are today going through what are, by and large, the much more positive outcomes from over 600 organisations that we've spoken to and surveyed, and we've got some comparisons of what we found out before, and we've now got an idea of sort of looking forward to 2021, what we think is coming up. From the Recruitment Pulse survey, what we've done is we've taken the four kind of key areas, four key findings, and we're going to talk about those in turn. When we asked recruitment agencies what their priorities were going to be for 2021, so looking ahead, what they were prioritising in their business, it was interesting to see that optimistically, focus has shifted in this survey from what were much more tentative, like battening down the hatches type approaches before, to now winning and retaining clients. So this is like a growth focused survey, it seems. We saw that a third of agencies have seen their clients re-engaging with them, which was something that we saw a lot in the previous surveys, that clients were kind of going quiet and going dark. We've seen that re-engagement over the last few months, which is great. And when asked about their outlook for the future, how they felt about what was coming up, an overwhelmingly positive reaction this time, whereas previously there was much more reservedness, a lot of sort of nervousness, as you'd kind of expect, a lot of uncertainty in the market, which it looks like is kind of fading away. Martin, obviously at Idibu, you're kind of at the front line of seeing job numbers, how many clients are working with your clients, so how many employers are advertising their roles again. What have you seen in terms of kind of re-engagement and numbers going back up?
We've seen it from probably around end of October, November last year. We saw that job posting levels had pretty much got back to what they were pre-COVID. So what we've been seeing up until, say, March last year, when they pretty much fell off a cliff. Mm-hmm. And as you said, probably when you were doing your earlier surveys, things were very dark, and we saw a massive downturn in the output. We also saw a big upturn in the level of applications. The ratio of applications per job around about between sort of June time had actually more than doubled its usual level, and then about November time, it had been steadily climbing, and we got back to pretty much pre-COVID level. That obviously dropped again as we went into December, and has picked up full steam ahead since we got back this year. So we probably just actually, the numbers are probably about 102%, so 2% over what we were seeing pre-March, actually, globally. And interesting, the UK is probably not quite there as of yet, but the States is really strong. So, I mean, it's been definitely since the last 3 months, mid of the end of Q4, we've seen a huge upturn in activity. And I think, it's interesting what you said about the survey in general. It's great to see that positivity. And I think just by the very nature, the industry we're in, recruitment, we work with hundreds of recruitment agencies, and they are by nature a positive bunch, you know what I mean? So that's not that surprising. That obviously everyone was, as humans as well as businesses, do you know what I mean, battening down the hatches and looking into survival mode. But they're very much kind of like, get up and get at it and let's go for it, do you know what I mean? So it's great to see that's reflected in the survey as well.
Rachel, what did you see as kind of most interesting in all of this?
I think what was really interesting for me is because of the candidate market in particular, so there's a complete divergence of candidates. There's obviously, there's an availability of candidates for temporary roles, but people that are in permanent roles are a lot more cautious. And what came out to me was for agencies, their need to have a much stronger candidate control process. So in order to kind of capitalise on what's happening in the market, in terms of the kind of availability of the temporary jobs, but on the permanent side, it's kind of having a better process, a better management around that candidate control piece.
Soph, how would you characterise how kind of investment is changing and how people are kind of getting back into growth? And you deal a lot with media contracts, people kind of forecasting 12 months ahead. What's going on there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the confidence is back there. I think, reversing even 6 months ago, people didn't know what situation we were going to be in, what we were facing. And like you say, batten down the hatches. And in terms of, looking at their advertising, they just couldn't forecast what was going to happen, over the next 3, 6, 12 months. But fast forward, 3, 6 months to now, we're seeing the confidence back. We're seeing the, really positive outlook. We're seeing the job numbers increase. We're seeing, the recruiters' usage of the CV databases increase, which, represents the increase in the jobs that they're working on. So, I can definitely see how people are becoming more confident and are actually able to sort of forecast over the next 6 to 12 months more accurately, which was virtually impossible 6 months ago.
So yeah, I think, what was really interesting was to see that 30% of respondents said that they wanted to invest in new technology. And that is predicated by the fact perhaps that, they did make some redundancies or furloughed or streamlined their business, but it's also a basis of wanting greater efficiencies. So, again, but investing and trying to, really optimise the returns that they're getting. And but I think, having the available resources to invest is a positive, of course.
Let's talk about candidates and job numbers then. So when we asked recruitment organisations what their biggest challenge was for the year ahead, the largest challenge that organisations found was that their clients weren't recruiting. So the job numbers simply weren't there, or they suspected they might not be there to kind of fuel the growth as they need it. Very much wrapped up in that, there were problems with candidates not being available on the market in the same way, in that there are lots and lots of kind of free agents, furlough schemes making people redundant, etc. But the kind of passive job market seems to have dried up quite a lot. I certainly, I can't imagine that I would be particularly enthusiastic about moving around much at the moment, although it does seem to be happening a little bit. So, Martin, maybe it's best to come to you first. You've mentioned that job numbers are back up to 102% of what they were, which is phenomenal, really. Are they distributed in the same way? Like, are some clients hiring so much that it's skewing the numbers, or is this an industry trend? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, I would say that what we can see, we get breakdowns by sector, and you've got the kind of the usual suspects that we'd say post-COVID that are, have much higher volumes than other sectors. So they'd be, health and mm-hmm. medicine. IT is performing really well still. Education, social care is up there, and legal as well has been doing okay. But the main ones are definitely the healthcare sector, IT, and probably education. That's where we see. And of course, I mean, you have to add a slight caveat, because it's important that we say our technology, we're distributing adverts, and you won't have a need for that. If you're an executive headhunter agency, you're not really got a need for our services. Do you know what I mean? You're not hiring at that volume. So we work with industries, whether that's logistics and warehouse staff, and admin, secretarial, healthcare, obviously, you know, contract temps, so on and so forth, will be heavy users of technology such as Idibu. So it is important that we say that, but in the main, they are the main sectors that are definitely driving that, you know, the volumes that we're seeing.
And just on that, Soph, you're probably a good person to ask about job boards, because job boards are, you know, economic upturns and downturns. Job boards are a pretty good barometer of how across industries candidate behaviour is changing, whether it's a shortage or surplus market, those kinds of things. Is there anything we can learn from the last, you know, since kind of August time where we did our last survey? Is there anything that we can learn from the way job boards have been behaving differently or the same, that would reflect candidate and client behaviour, do you think?
Yeah, certainly. I think it falls into two sort of categories. It's the roles, you know, which everybody's looking to fill at the moment, like we talked about, you know, nurses, carers, social care, etc., where, you know, demand is high, you know, jobs are high in that sector, but it's really, really competitive market to attract, you know, job seekers. So people are having to think out of the box. Job boards are having to think out of the box how they can attract job seekers from, you know, potentially other areas which aren't in such demand, where there are large volumes of job seekers, to try and manage that balance. On the flip side, you know, clients as well are having to look at other ways of advertising outside of the norms, because they're purely not getting the volume of job seekers they need to fill their positions.
And I think it comes back to kind of what I said at the start as well, around the agency's role now for permanent candidates is to help employers control that process. I think one person commented that they saw a 300% increase of job offers being turned down. So what's happening is candidates on the permanent side are getting through the process and then they're getting cold feet. And I think there's a few things that agencies can do to help around that, in terms of controlling the process, talking about counter offers. But one of the other big messages that came out from in-house recruiters was their number one priority was around candidate experience. So how can agencies help with that process? What can they do in terms of helping with onboarding, ensuring that their workers are already, you know, in a compliant pool and they've had, you know, the right checks taken place, so that the placements happen in a faster time frame, so that, you know, again, you know, it's a smoother process for everybody, and it's kind of joining up those two sides.
I want to pick up on this point around there being lots of candidates, but passive candidates being less likely to move. I think that's quite an interesting and relatively rare phenomenon for recruiters. Normally, if there was a massive candidate surplus, the implication would be that it would be very, very easy to find and place candidates. But of course, where recruiters may be very used to over the last 5 years, having really strong databases, candidate relationships, being able to move people around with relative ease, they're now relying on new talent acquisition rather than their existing database and existing relationships, because it may well be that people they've placed a few years ago don't want to move again in a few years. They're not interested in moving right now, which might make some sense of the fact that when we're managing advertising for clients, we're seeing a sort of disproportionate need for new advertising sources, as opposed to how many candidates we would expect them to need. They need more new candidates than they do candidates in total, if you see what I mean. They need to be engaging with active candidates, because they're the ones that they can actually place. And to Martin's point, more importantly, that they can place fast. Because as we know, there is a certain aspect of agency recruitment, which is like a fastest finger or fastest candidate first aspects of it. It's no good having the right candidate 3 weeks after your competitors got them. You need to be able to get them quickly, and that's where, you know, relying on active candidates, seeing job ads in a multitude of different locations, being able to apply directly and kind of speeding it up that way seems more important than it used to be.
I think that's also around making sure that you've got the right, it comes down to the right tech in place again as well, doesn't it? Because if your candidate's kind of, applying, whether it be through, your website or a job board, you need that integrated with your CRM, you need to make sure that you've got your compliance done and that the process kind of flows quite seamlessly.
Slight change of tack. Let's talk about well-being and culture at recruitment organisation. It feels so normal now to talk about this sort of stuff, doesn't it? But you've only got to go back sort of 18 months, and this would have been a slightly niche, a slightly nice to have conference topic, whereas now it seems to be that sort of every other like priority agenda item has something to do with well-being or culture or the way that we work. We've gone from figures of like 42% of sort of positivity around like well-being and sort of workplace well-being at the beginning. Again, went up a bit to like a 60%, and now we're up to around 70% of people who feel sort of positive about the well-being of their recruitment organisation.
I do think this third lockdown has been harder still for some people in terms of, there were a lot of comments in the survey around homeschooling and the impact of that. There were also some comments around then even what impact did that have on candidate behaviour, and let's be honest, sometimes it can fall more to women, and were they then able to go and look for new jobs? So I think actually from things I've heard, third lockdown has been harder, but I think a lot of organisations, because we've been in it for so long, have done more to protect their well-being of their staff, have introduced initiatives, have got, helplines in place, or all of those other things, and it's become something that people are talking about. So probably, organisations feel better because it's out in the open. Maybe that's part of it as well.
I think when I look across all the stuff that we've done as a business, and when I talk to recruiters about what they're doing as businesses, the common theme seems to be about amping up the human aspect whilst taking away as much fatigue as possible. I came across yet another article this morning about Zoom fatigue, and I remember seeing a similar thing right at the beginning of lockdown, after people had done 2 weeks of Zoom and were already shattered doing video calls. We asked organisations about getting ahead, and what we mean by that, there's kind of grand plans for 2021. We asked what their plans and priorities were. They told us about they need to get results, but they would like to do that with less budget, either because they're forward planning or because they just have less in the first place. Competitiveness was raised several times as being really important. So I think there's maybe an expectation as we come out of this, things are going to be that much more difficult in the old normal, where you're trying to win contracts, you're trying to place candidates against your competition. And there was, and we've mentioned technology a few times, but there was a big focus in the survey results around making sure that the processes and tech was in place to give their team the best possible chance of being successful this year. Rachel, let's start with you. When it comes to putting tech in place, giving people what they need to succeed, what have been the priority areas in your experience? What are people really focusing on?
Well, I'm going to turn that the other way around, because I'm going to say last year what wasn't a priority, I think understandably, was recruitment marketing. And forward-thinking organisations, let's hope, I think everybody wants to be kind of, very marketing-led, but not everybody had got the capacity, the financial capacity to do that. So unfortunately, I think on average there were about 10% of marketers were kind of made redundant or certainly furloughed. But now what we're starting to see is those people are back in the business. And we're really starting to hear early in the new year that, strong start in 2021 has to be about, first and foremost, if we're talking about competitive advantage, what not just what do you look like online, that's important, but, and again, where we're saying that, 40% of businesses were looking to diversify, does your website correlate now with where you are as a business? And if it doesn't, then obviously you're going to find it very difficult to achieve on your objectives.
Making processes better with tech, getting the right tools in place. recruiters have said that's a priority. Martin, does that match up with the conversations that you have?
Yeah, I mean, again, going back to last year, we were probably a little bit surprised, but we broke various kind of new business records in Q4 last year, which was great, But I think it definitely indicates that recruiters are looking at where they need to get technology in to improve those efficiencies and improve processes, not only to be able to work now, but like you say, if there is a new normal when we get through the latest lockdown, do you know what I mean? And vaccines are taking place, and we see more of a world like we've been used to. There's going to be an increase again in activity. So agencies now are definitely wanting to get things in place now to be set up for how they want to be working over the next few years. So that is something that we definitely see. I think as far as their planning, I mean, analytics is an obvious one. If you can't measure it, you can't improve on it. So we're always banging the drum. We have a huge report suite that we offer with our services. And some agencies, incredibly, there's just, we see in the reports, because we do like quarterly reviews with clients, strategically trying to get them to improve things and look at different areas. And we still see agencies where they've just got huge amounts of candidates that have never even been, they haven't even been read, their CVs haven't been opened, they haven't been touched, Now we know there's volume there, but again, there's technology there. We're looking at things like filters and ranking that can help with those things, But I think they've got to start using analytics more and measuring what they're doing and looking at where they can improve and get better and quicker and faster. And they're going to need to be a lot more agile and fleet of foot and make sure they attract the best people into the agencies. And I'd agree with what Rachel says, about recruitment marketing. That's got to be an area that all businesses are looking at. I think going back to the first point we spoke about, winning and retaining clients, whether it's that angle about marketing, the areas that you work in, the niches that you've got, what makes you different, why am I going to use an agency if we could do it in-house? So there's that side, and then you've also got to better market to the candidates, use the technology and tools to keep them engaged and the communication flowing. There's loads of tools out there, not just ours, but there's other ones that are very easy to set those things up, and it doesn't impact on the teams. You can do it with a less resource. The point you made about businesses wanting to plan ahead for better results with the resources that they've got. Well, there's only technology that'll help you do that, So you've got to embrace that. Most people have managed with less now throughout 2020. So it's important to learn and plan and get the best partners to get into the future as to what you need from a tech point of view.
We've definitely spoken to a lot of organisations who have had to streamline certain aspects of their business, which normally, I'm saying streamline, that's normally a euphemism for one person being made redundant and then another person taking up, or a team of people taking up small amounts of that person's job. I'm speaking to directors of recruitment organisations who are managing job board contracts that they haven't had to worry about in the last 5 years because they've had a marketing exec, for example. And so I'll come to you in a sec about kind of what the sorts of things that that people are offloading. But I think I'd really encourage recruitment organisations to think about this problem in reverse, which is, yes, they're having to do more with less, but so are their clients. And I believe there's a massive opportunity for the best recruitment organisations to really lead on customer service, on going above and beyond, offering things that make their clients' lives genuinely easier, not relying on just good results. And, of course, every recruitment agency will live or die by whether they've got the right candidates or not. But there's stuff they can do in addition to that, which might be guaranteeing exposure on social media or a certain amount of advertising channels, which would take the role of maybe like a marketing or employer brand person that might not still exist at the employer. It might be taking some responsibility for onboarding or the virtual interview process. You know, maybe they can make services available there that their clients would otherwise struggle to fulfill. So I think there's a big opportunity. It of course comes with the challenge, which everyone's facing, which is that we're trying to do more with less. But I think the uplifting message there is to remember that everyone's doing that. And when we look at the employer version of this survey, so I forgot to mention at the beginning of this webinar that so of the 600 organizations that we survey, we interview both recruitment organizations and direct employers, so we can compare the two and see what we learn from both. And one of the things we've learned is that the employer challenges, by and large, are similar. So they are also struggling with a lack of resource. They are also leaning on their suppliers more. They're also trying to get more from their suppliers for less, etc. So there's plenty of, for the savvy, there's plenty of opportunity there. It will just require a little bit of investment and quick thinking. So what sort of stuff have you been speaking to people about things that they're looking for particular help with, or that they need to make them more effective?
Yeah, I think firstly, this sort of area in terms of, job board advertising hasn't really been looked at very closely for many years. People have just been renewing the same contracts they've had for years and years and years. It hasn't changed much. They haven't questioned it. They haven't, sort of analysed the performance in any depth whatsoever, due to various reasons. And I think this last 12 months has really made people step back and actually have a look at where they're spending their money, and what they're getting their money for. So the biggest thing that people are coming, to me, well, there's two things. There's firstly to ask for, our advice. What are we seeing, other companies doing at the moment? What are the other options for us? Do we need to keep renewing our contracts in this way? Is there, room for more flexibility? How do we move, our strategy from where it's been in the last 10 years to perhaps a more cost-effective, flexible and more efficient strategy over the coming months, and especially when we're in still quite uncertain times. Despite there being more confidence, people don't want to plan, 12 months ahead, right at this moment in time. So, our expertise in that area, and I think our unbiased opinion as well. The majority of staffing firms we speak to sort of buy directly from each job board, as well. So, the information that they have is what has been given to them from the job boards, and the data that they have is very minimal, really. So to have, another pair of eyes look over that from an outside view, with expertise in the whole market, is extremely valuable at the moment.
The story doesn't stop here. Rachel, I know there's an amazing resource available from Access for anyone watching this. Am I right? Tell us about taking control.
Yeah, so we took the findings from the last couple of surveys, and we've written a white paper. In fact, we've written a couple of white papers. We've got a whole hub of resources, but I think the message in the most recent one is, again, touching on all the areas that we've spoken about, the impact, and I think following on from what you just said, recruiters wanted to hear from other recruiters in their peer group. How have they handled the pandemic? What have they done? What strategies have they employed? What's worked? That's what we kind of brought together as well, to share some of those insights. But the fundamental message was around what in these kind of dramatically changing times can you take control of? And that was all around kind of practical takeaways and giveaways. So yeah, we'd kind of direct you through to that hub. And as you said, it's evolving, the landscape's evolving, we continue to evolve. So, there's new assets coming there all of the time, but just really kind of lots of resources, lots of feedback from other agencies in some similar scenarios, how they've handled. And yeah, we've had over 500 downloads of those kind of various assets today.
Martin, for anyone who wants to know more about Idibu, what you do, what you're kind of seeing in the market, where's the best place for them to go? What should they look at?
Well, you can follow us on Twitter or LinkedIn. We post regular updates of our Idibu index, which gives oversights on the industry in general, UK and global, as well as the market sector breakdowns. And on the website, we've got regular blogs, and we do have a hub information as well, which is more kind of about, I mean, it doesn't matter if you're using a tech similar to ours, it'll still be relevant, but it's a kind of center for getting the best out of technology like ours that you can find on the website as well. But yeah.
So some good, honest, clever advice on all things job boards and job ads.
Exactly.
So Talent Nexus are the best next step if you are looking at your job advertising, that you're one of these people that wants to do more with less. We offer a completely free, and I mean free financially and free of obligation and free of a huge amount of input in terms of time from you, of sort of everything advertising related. So all we need is a very short conversation to kind of see what your goals and objectives are, and we'll get one of our kind of expert analysts to look at what you're doing and see what you could be doing more effectively. And I think that's everything. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening and watching. And we'll see how quickly we get out of COVID to see whether there's going to be a part 4. But if not, the third and final part has been
Let's hope not.
Yeah, let's hope not. A much more optimistic view. So looking forward to seeing what happens in the rest of the year.